Story 1, our first. Story is called The Footprints in the Snow. I live in northern Minnesota, where winter lasts almost half the year. The landscape becomes a vast, white emptiness, beautiful but also deeply isolating. This happened last January, during a brutal snowstorm that shut down almost everything. I had just moved into a small, remote cabin outside town. It was cheap, quiet, and isolated, which sounded perfect for someone trying to get away from the noise of city life. I thought I had found my own private paradise, until the night everything changed. Round 1 a.m., the howling wind suddenly died down. Everything became so unnervingly silent that I could hear my own breathing, the soft crackle of the fire, the beat of my own heart. The silence was heavier than the storm had been. I got up to check the wood stove and happened to glance out the front window. That's when I saw them. Footprints. Fresh footprints, stark against the untouched blanket of white, leading directly to my cabin. My blood ran cold. There shouldn't have been anyone out there. The snow was several feet deep. The temperature had plummeted to nearly -20 degrees Fahrenheit, and I didn't have any neighbors within walking distance. Curiosity, mixed with a growing sense of dread, got the better of me. I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously approached the window, peering into the darkness. The prints stopped right outside my front door, as if whoever made them was standing there, waiting. The prints themselves were large, much bigger than mine. The stride was long, almost unnaturally long, suggesting a towering height. But the creepiest detail, the one that made the hairs on my arms stand up, was that there were no footprints leading away. Only a single track leading toward the house. None leaving. It was as if the person, or thing, had simply materialized out of the blizzard and walked to my door. Panic set in. I raced round the small cabin, locking every door, every window, every latch I could find. My mind was racing, trying to find a logical explanation, but none came. At around 3 a.m., just as a fragile sense of security began to settle in, I heard it. A single knock on the front door. It was slow and heavy, a deep, resonant thud that seemed to shake the very frame of the cabin. Just one knock, then a voice drifted through the thick wooden door. "Let me in. It's cold." The voice wasn't panicked or desperate. It wasn't the cry of someone in trouble. It was calm. Way too calm. It was a measured, almost conversational tone that sent a fresh wave of terror through me. I didn't move. I didn't answer. I held my breath, hoping it would go away, thinking it was just a figment of my overactive imagination. Then the voice came again, but this time it was right outside my bedroom window. "I see your light on." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. My bedroom window was a good 6 feet off the ground. Whoever it was had to be standing on something, or they were tall enough to peer inside effortlessly. But the most terrifying part was that the pristine snow outside that window was completely untouched. There were no footprints, no marks, nothing. I stayed awake until the first light of sunrise, huddled in the corner of my living room with a kitchen knife clutched in my hand. When the storm finally cleared, I worked up the courage to check outside. The footprints were still there, leading straight to my front door, but still none leaving. The sheriff came out to look round, but he just shrugged, suggesting the departing footprints could have been covered by drifting snow. But that didn't explain the voice, or how someone could stand at my bedroom window without disturbing a single snowflake. Every winter since, on random, quiet nights, I've heard faint knocking. Always just one knock. always followed by the same calm voice. "Let me in. It's cold." Story 2. Our second story is titled The Passenger on Route 19. This happened in Colorado right after Christmas a few years ago. I was driving home late from a mandatory holiday shift at my retail job, sometime round 11 p.m. A heavy snowstorm had started an hour earlier, and Route 19, a notoriously desolate stretch of highway, was almost completely empty. The visibility was terrible. My headlights could barely cut through the swirling snow, illuminating maybe 10 feet of road ahead. About halfway down the route, my high beams caught a figure standing on the shoulder of the road. It was a woman, with long, dark hair, and she wasn't wearing a coat despite the blizzard. Alarmed, I slowed my car to a crawl and cracked the passenger window. A gust of icy wind hit my face. "Ma'am, are you okay?" "Do you need help?" I shouted over the wind. She didn't answer. She didn't even look at me. She just pointed a pale, slender finger toward the passenger door. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to drive away. But the thought of leaving someone out in this weather felt wrong. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the door. She climbed into the car without saying a word. Her clothes were soaking wet. Her long hair was covered in a delicate layer of frost, and she smelled of damp earth and cold air. She sat perfectly still in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead, her breathing quiet and shallow. After a minute of unnerving silence, I tried to break the tension. "Where are you heading?" I asked, my voice a little shaky. She whispered one word: "Home." Her voice was flat, almost monotone, completely devoid of emotion. It was barely audible over the hum of the engine and the whipping wind. "Where's home?" I asked. Hoping for a more specific answer, she slowly raised her hand, her movements stiff and deliberate, and pointed forward down the dark, snowy road. So I drove. After maybe 5 minutes of tense silence, I tried making small talk again, desperate to fill the void. "Do you live around here?" I asked, glancing over at her. She didn't respond. Instead, she turned her head toward me so slowly, like the movement was causing her immense pain, and her dark eyes met mine. She said, "You should have kept driving." A chill crawled down my back, colder than the winter air outside. The words hung in the space between us, filled with a meaning I couldn't comprehend, but deeply feared. Before I could speak, the car suddenly jerked as if I had hit a massive pothole. I slammed on the brakes, and the car slid to a stop in the middle of the empty road. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I turned to check on her, to ask if she was okay. The passenger seat was empty. The door was still locked from the inside. And outside, there were no footprints in the snow. None near the car, none on the road behind us. Just a fresh and touched blanket of white. She had vanished. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, shaking, staring at the empty seat where she had been just moments before. Later, I looked up Route 19 online. It turns out that every winter, multiple drivers report seeing a woman standing by the road, trying to hitch a ride in the middle of a storm. Some say she gets in their car. Some say she never speaks. And some say she disappears the moment they pass mile marker 72, the exact spot where a young woman died in a tragic car accident 14 years ago, on a snowy night just like this one. The next morning, I checked my dash cam footage. The audio was there, my voice, my questions, but there was not a single sound of her voice. And in the video, the passenger seat was empty the entire time. Story 3. Our final story is the cabin across the lake. My family owns a small winter cabin in a remote part of Maine, situated right on the edge of a large, frozen lake. We only visit during holidays, so for most of the year, the place is empty and silent, swallowed by the wilderness. Last December, I decided to stay there alone for a week to do some writing and unwind from a stressful year. Across the frozen lake, maybe 200 yards away, stands another cabin. It's always been there for as long as I can remember. We never knew who owned it, and throughout my entire childhood, I never saw a single sign of life. No lights, no cars, no smoke from the chimney. It was just an old wooden cabin, slowly rotting into the landscape. On my second night there, as a gentle snow started to fall, I was looking out the kitchen window across the lake and I froze. The cabin across the lake had a light on. A dim, sickly yellow glow emanated from one of the upstairs windows, cutting a faint square into the deepening twilight. I tried to convince myself that someone had finally bought the place, that I finally had neighbors. But at 2 a.m., I woke up with a strange sense of unease and checked again. The light was still on. Except now, there was a figure standing in the window. It was just a silhouette, a dark shape against the faint light, perfectly still. It was facing my cabin, watching. I barely slept that night. Every hour, I'd creep to the window and check, and every hour, the figure was still there, unmoving. The next morning, fueled by a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity, I walked across the frozen lake to check it out. The snow from the night before was freshly fallen and completely undisturbed. There were no footprints round the cabin. None on the rickety front stairs. None by the door. The cabin door itself was boarded up and secured with rusty nails. I managed to pry one board loose and peer inside. The interior was empty, cold, and thick with the dust of decades. No furniture, no electricity, no working lights, nothing. But when I circled around to the back and looked up at the second-floor window, I saw it clearly, a set of handprints on the inside of the dusty glass. They were large ones. Pressed from the inside. That night, my dread returned as the sun went down. As if on cue, the light in the cabin across the lake flickered back on. And the same figure stood there again, a black cutout against the yellow glow, staring at me. Except this time, it moved. It slowly raised an arm and pointed directly at my cabin. I felt something deep in my chest, a fear so raw and primal that I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It felt like a direct, personal threat. I packed everything I owned that night, my hands shaking so badly I could barely zip my bags, and I drove home at the first hint of dawn. When I returned with my family 2 months later, the cabin across the lake was dark again. There were no footprints, no light, no handprints on the window. Everything was as it had always been. But sometimes, in the deep silence of those winter nights, when I'm back at our cabin, I swear I still see a faint yellow glow in that upstairs window. Watching. Waiting. These were 3 of the creepiest true winter stories I've ever received. If you have a real story of your own winter, summer, or anything in between, send it in. Your story may be featured next. Thanks for watching. Stay warm, stay safe, and remember, winter hides more than just the cold.